hello, and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham Abode podcast studio, and we are super excited to have Richelle LeCourt on our show today. She is another person that follows the carnivore diet, and she has an awesome success story to tell us. And, you know, what a fitting week to have two guests on our show this week that talk about carnivore, considering it's Thanksgiving and all. So, Richelle, welcome to our show.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, you've got a great story about why you went carnivore and a great success story. And I'm sure many other people that you talked to that have followed you have had a good success story with carnivore. So tell us your story and why you started carnivore.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity. And this is a story that's very tender for me and for a lot of people, obviously, given the situation and state of our country and our world right now. There are a lot of people dealing with infertility. So my story began in 2011. I wanted to lose some weight and kind of buff up a little bit. And then I decided that I needed a goal. And so I chose to enter a bikini contest. I started the diet process. I started the prep work. I did really well. I built a lot of muscle. My body just naturally builds muscle very easily. And I noticed after the show, I just didn't feel very good. I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. And I kind of ended up having a bit of a disordered way of eating. So I started binge eating after that show. I was obviously starving because you have to get your body to a certain body fat percentage. And I also placed dead last in the bikini contest. And the judges asked me if I was in the wrong category because I was too muscular. So that prompted me to try the next category, which was figure.
Yeah.
The tiered system. There's bikini, figure, physique, and then women's bodybuilding. But I think they've eliminated women's bodybuilding now. Anywho.
I think, it's interesting because I follow it because I have a twin brother that follows it.
Okay.
And they've added it back a few years ago, but they might have taken it out again. So
yeah, I heard they were taking it out because, well, ladies that look like men.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you.
Yeah, so I chose to do another show, and I placed very well. There were 17 people, and I placed 5th out of 17 because I was so muscular. It was very, very easy for me to shred up and just pack on the muscle. And so I continued my bodybuilding career for a few years. And in 2014, I did 3 shows back to back in about a 5-week period. I did novice, provincials, and nationals when I was living in Canada, all within a month, approximately a month or 5 weeks time. And it shut down my endocrine system, which is my reproductive system. I still had a cycle, but I wasn't ovulating. I was able to get my body sub 10%, but it just wreaked havoc on my body. And I realized that there was a problem with my eating at that time as well, because I would wake up in the middle of the night in my bed with a jar of peanut butter that would be empty. And I was like, what the heck? I don't remember eating this. I could taste the peanut butter in my mouth, but I'm like, I don't remember eating this. There were a lot of things that were just kind of going awry in my body, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I looked great, but I felt like death. And fast forward to 2019, I moved from Alberta to Ontario. I met my now husband, who is also a former bodybuilder. We fell in love, we got married, and we wanted to have children. And after 2.5 years of trying, we were like, what's going on? Like, like we're not preventing having children. We really want to have children. We finally went for testing. And then we received the diagnosis shortly after moving to Orange, Texas, that we were completely infertile. They said that there was no chance for us to conceive naturally, that our only option would potentially be in vitro, and that even that couldn't be guaranteed. And it was approximately $40,000. And like, I took it really hard. I said, we must have missed something. Like, we eat really well. Like, we thought we ate really well, lots of greens and cruciferous vegetables and all the things they tell you to do.
Yeah.
Protein. Meanwhile, I had a closet restrictive binge eating disorder that my husband actually didn't know about until we started carnivore. And it was just a compound on a compound on a compound effect going on in both of our bodies. And one day he received a phone call from a friend and they were just catching up, and his friend had shared, oh, I went carnivore and got rid of my back pain after about, I think it was 3 months or so. And my husband had been struggling with this chronic arthritic elbow pain. And he was like, you know what? I think I want to give it a try. So he sent me Dr. Ken Berry's video. I watched it and I was like, oh, not another diet. I don't want to do another diet. It's restrictive, because I lived the diet lifestyle, the diet culture, the competitive culture. You can only eat this much, and once a week you're allowed to eat this much. And that was just never the case for me. And it was very concerning coming into carnivore. I was very nervous about it. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. And then Ken Berry interviewed Kelly Hogan, who shared her story about how she overcame infertility and had 3 successful pregnancies. And I was like, oh, I am all in. So we chose on October 2nd, 2022 to go carnivore. As you can hear in the background, there was a success story here.
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Late December 2022, we conceived, but I miscarried in January, which I already had a history of miscarriage anyway due to low progesterone. So I was like, okay, my body has healed enough to get pregnant, and so has his body. So this is a good sign. And then April, we conceived again. And last December, I gave birth to our beautiful baby boy, who is a fully carnivore baby. And I'm still carnivore today, and he's mostly carnivore.
I love it. So speaking of that, when did you start feeding him meat?
So he started showing interest in food between 4 and 5 months. He already had 4 teeth at that point. So I was like, okay. I started giving him strips of steak, chunks of hamburger, stuff that he had to really work on, because I read the book Jaws. I can't remember the author of the book, but it was talking about the necessity of developing our jaw properly. So not only does it develop our airway and our ability to swallow properly, but it also places your ears properly, and it gives you a more attractive face. And me growing up, having had braces 3 times because my jaws are too small to cage my tongue, I don't want that for my son. I don't want him to have his wisdom teeth pulled like I had to, because of crowding, because of an underdeveloped jaw. If someone would have gone through orthotropics with me or myofunctional work when I was in my earlier years, like pre-20s, I probably wouldn't have had to have braces so many times and have so many things corrected. And they're still trying to put me back in braces. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this again. Like, it's not going to correct the problem. And I know what the problem is my jaw did not develop to the proper size, to the appropriate size. And now I have to live with that, but it doesn't mean he has to. So I started on difficult to chew foods because that's what it recommends. It also recommends, leafy greens, and obviously that's BS. I'm not doing that. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, I think back about, when I was growing up, and even when we had kids 20 some years ago, about what they talked about when we should introduce solid foods and stuff. And I think, we really need to look at what our ancestors did. I always think about that when it comes to eating, when it comes to movement and exercise. What did our ancestors do? I can almost guarantee you this, that our ancestors probably fed their babies meat as soon as they could eat meat. I would almost guarantee that. I mean, sure, they were breastfeeding too, no doubt about it. But what are your thoughts on that, Janet?
Well, both my children were so different. I mean, they were night and day as far as interest in food and eating. I think our second child at 6 months was still just holding food in his mouth, like, I don't know what you're doing here. What is this? But our oldest child, I try to do everything by the book, because we were pharmacists, right? Like, we were going to do it to the T. We're going to do everything the doctor tells us. And at 4 months, I was looking at my pediatrician, like, we aren't happy, neither one of us. And so she said, okay, go get some food, go get some rice cereal. And that night, I think my child said, finally, you are giving me food, because I think he ate like a cup of rice cereal. So after that, it was like, it kind of opened Pandora's box for us, because we were like, we're doing everything they're telling us, and this isn't working for this child. This child's mad. Like, and he was just starving, So it was my mom who said to me, you might want to consider trying some real food. And we were like, well, that's against everything that we've been taught. And she's like, well, and grandma was right. Imagine that. So,
and we should have, honestly, in retrospect, we should have probably started feeding him meat. I don't know if he had teeth yet, but
no,
we
he
could
didn't,
have got a small piece of ground beef or something.
Yeah, but it didn't take long before he, in fact, it was once food was introduced, he's like, game on, man. He was like, this is over.
Oh,
Mom,
yeah.
you're done.
And Amy, I mean, Richelle, you mentioned something about the development of the jaw by chewing meat. And when you said that, a bingo light went on for me, because my older brother had lots of orthodontic problems with his, he had braces and all kinds of problems with his teeth. And he had his wisdom teeth out when he was 18 or whatever. And it was a nasty procedure. My twin brother and I hardly had any kind of problems and didn't have to have our wisdom teeth out.
Oh, wow.
And,
that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and here's what, so my mom was really struggling after having a 2-year-old and then 2 twins. So my dad helped as much as he could. And we were just always hungry. So my dad started feeding us meat secretly, because my mom didn't want us to eat solid food. But my dad would feed us meat secretly. And I don't know if it has anything to do with our teeth, but it sure could have. Because he said he was feeding us real food when we were 4 months old, because we were loving it.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing to me. My dad told me this story when my youngest half brother was teething. My dad used to freeze pork chop bones, or rib bones, put them in the freezer, and then give them to him. And he was like a little bam bam, just just chewing on it. And so that gave me the idea for him too, for teething. You can get all those weird silicone toys and wooden stuff and Montessori this and that, but it's like, why not give him the bone? Right. Let him get at that cartilage. Let him get at the minerals. And he loves it still to this day. We went to a barbecue place and they had buffalo ribs there. And I mean, they're a good sized rib. And I have a picture of me pulling on one rib and he's pulling on another rib. And we're both happy.
Right. I mean, and really, we shouldn't be surprised. Why should we be surprised? I mean, that's what humans have thrived on for thousands of years. Yet we're like totally astonished by, well, why would he like a bone, or why would he like eating meat? It's kind of amazing to me. And that reminds me, I want to share this video of yours that you have talking about professionals and doctors recommending
nowhere. If he went to school, he didn't learn nothing. I don't think he went to school nowhere.
Janet,
if he went to school, he didn't learn nothing.
Janet talked about listen to what the doctors would tell us. Janet talks about listen to what the doctors would tell us, but when doctors tell you not to eat meat and not to eat, or limit your meat or limit your eggs, you really do have to question where they're getting this. Because just like I said, we've been thriving on those things for thousands of years as humans. If they were bad, we wouldn't have thrived as humans.
Correct. And I love that you brought this up, because another part of my background and story. Yeah,
run away.
It must be almost nap time, I'm guessing.
Yes, and he just had a hard fall because he's learning how to pull himself up on things. And
believe me, by the time you get to the next one, you're like, oh, you fell. Oh, okay. I feel for the second one, but we were talking about this at work, and it's like, our second one, there was no restrictions, because he was watching brother and everything that was going on, and so it was like, lower the crib so he can just get out, because he's gonna get out. He's just gonna go, and we'd hear thunk, and my mom would be like, what's that? And I'm saying, it's just Jordan getting out of the crib.
Yes,
so important.
So, you got to wonder, Richelle, how many people, of course, Jan and I, being pharmacists that specialize in hormones, we deal with a lot of people with infertility.
Yeah.
And many times it's a dietary problem.
Yeah.
PCOS, you've probably heard of that. And they might have, I doubt they diagnosed you with PCOS because you're definitely not typical PCOS, but PCOS definitely does have low progesterone. But most of the time, it's kind of the opposite of what your diet was. Your diet was so restrictive that you started, your endocrine system went into stress, and which is not, you were still cycling, but not ovulating. Not that uncommon when you're at a top conditioned athlete. We hear about that. We usually deal with just the opposite, where a PCOS patient is overweight, they're really inflamed, they're eating the wrong kind of foods, and they just stop cycling because their body is just not prepared for a pregnancy. And really, as much as you can give them progesterone, you can give them thyroid, and maybe some other medications I'm not a big fan of, metformin, short term maybe. Ultimately, it's a dietary problem, and they need to change their diet. It's a metabolic problem, and they need to change their diet, period.
Yeah, well, and I like that you brought this up because I did try being vegetarian, and then I tried being vegan. I was like, oh, well, maybe I should try that. And it didn't last for very long. It was approximately, I would say, 4 to 6 months. I don't remember exactly. But initially I felt better, and then I started feeling worse. I was a part of that juicing phase and the celery juice by that, whatever his name is, the weirdo there that says that you shouldn't eat eggs because they cause cancer, and just stupid stuff. And I remember my husband came to me one day and he was like, I really think you should go back to eating meat. And I said, why? And he said, because you were nicer when you ate meat.
That's a good reason.
It kind of stuck me, and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe there's something to this. I don't know why I never put 2 and 2 together. I knew protein was important. I knew animal protein was important. Obviously, when you're building muscles, it's much easier to build muscles and strong muscles from protein than it is from rice. And I get that if that's all some people have access to, but for me, it was just like, no. And part of our diagnosis, so I had already been previously diagnosed with PCOS, but they couldn't figure out why I had polycystic ovarian syndrome because, like you said, I'm not a typical patient. Right. I don't exhibit typical features. So I had to go for an MRI, and they found a benign pituitary tumor that was elevating my prolactin. So it was a whole process, but I had to go basically, I think it was every 2 weeks to have my prolactin checked because it kept going up and up and up and up and up. And this doctor sent me for the MRI, and he says, typically this is indicative of a pituitary tumor. It presses on certain things, and then it causes you to have elevated prolactin, which for those who don't know, prolactin is the lactation hormone. I wasn't lactating, but I was getting closer to lactating because it kept going up. But that was also causing my infertility because my body just couldn't get that signal to work, which was also suppressing my ability to ovulate, which makes sense to me why I was struggling with the infertility. And obviously a tumor, benign or not, would be indicative of inflammation. And my body was full of inflammation. There were mornings, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. There were mornings I could not get out of bed because I was in excruciating pain. I have no discs basically from C1 to C7 from multiple really terrible accidents. I fractured my pelvis when I was 20. My collarbones are not symmetrical, just stupid accidents and sports and not going and getting help because you don't want to miss track and field, even though you dislocated your collarbone in your shoulder. You're like, no, I'm still going to go to the meet. Yeah, I'm still going to the meet. So a lot of it was, self-inflicted chronic pain, but I just thought I was going to have to live that way for the rest of my life. I was like, okay, I might make it to 70 before I'm wheelchair bound. I'm going to live my life to the fullest now and stay healthy and stay fit. And I saw a chiropractor 5 days a week, to try and keep me moving and stuff like that. But I knew that there had to be something. And it was about 6 weeks into Carnivore where I finally felt strong enough to give up my sugar addiction, which was another whole other realm. And when I gave that up within 2 days, my pain went from a 9 out of a 10 to about a 2. And I was like, this whole time it was sugar and sweeteners this whole time. You mean I could have got rid of those a few weeks ago, a few months ago, a couple years ago and not had this pain? I mean, I probably wouldn't have. I mean, most of us are in denial about those things. We're like, it couldn't be anything to do with my diet. No, it had everything to do with my diet.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you touched on that. I was telling Shawn, I came home from counseling this person whose blood sugars were in the 300s and AC, you know, her inflammation is just off the chart, and yet she's eating well. She's eating everything she's supposed to, and you're like, you know, and then you start digging in, and it's like, but they're not acknowledging the stuff that they're putting in. You know, it's like, yes, I'm doing this, but they don't want to admit the other parts of it.
Right.
So I do think that denial part is really something that has to be addressed along the way. And basically, I think becoming a parent was the process that it took you and your husband to get to, like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took almost 4 years to the day for us to conceive. And I mean, I wouldn't change any part of our process at all. I think it was necessary for us to go through that because we got to grow stronger together. We grew in our faith. You know, we grew as individuals, and we were able to discuss those difficult subjects like, you know, how do you parent? How do you discipline? How do you, you know, especially in the world that we live in right now, it's like, what are our plans? Are we going to do baby-led weaning? Are we going to do the rice pablum? Are we going to, my husband really is amazing, and he trusts my discernment, and he's been very supportive and encouraging when I've told him, like, hey, we're going to start the baby on steak. And he's like, okay.
Okay.
He was like, okay, that sounds good. And I mean, my husband isn't strict carnivore anymore. I would say he's more ketovore. He incorporates a little bit of like low glycemic fruit. And every now and again, he likes to have some rice or some bread or something like that. But I mean, he also has a very different appetite and response. So for him, he's a hard gainer. Like, it's really difficult for him to gain weight, to gain muscle mass. And he is the type of person, when he gets into ketosis, it stumps his appetite and he just doesn't want to eat. So it got to the point where he was like chronically under eating. He was eating maybe 2 steaks a day, which for a guy that's 6'1" and 230 pounds of muscle, that's not a lot of food. And he dropped down to like 190 pounds. And I was like, okay, no,
wow,
we can't weigh the same. You need to eat more food. And he was like, I'm just not hungry. I am not hungry. So him being in ketosis means catabolism for him, means loss of lean mass, means no appetite, means so for him, incorporating that is really, really important. And you know, from his mouth, he needs to look threatening. He needs to look like he can protect our family. And that he does. I would say that he does. He's a very strong muscle man. Obviously, he's a former bodybuilder. And that was actually his nickname in our old neighborhood. All the little kids called him Muscle Man. It was really sweet. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, Richelle, I wish I had his problem of putting weight on. I probably don't wish I had that problem, but I've never had a hard time putting on weight, including muscle mass, but also fat. I'm a mesomorph,
Yes.
so that's usually just pretty easy for us to put on weight. But I will say about him switching from strict carnivore, and this is what, because Jan and I get the question a lot too. It's like, well, are you guys strict carnivore? And we're like, well, no, we're not. But one of the reasons we're not is because we have, you know, a healthy metabolism now. So, but when somebody is sick and they have problems, we tell them to go strict carnivore. And then they're like, well, you eat berries and you eat fruit and you eat, you know, vegetables. Yeah. And potatoes. But I'm not sick. But I was, you know, 12 years ago or so, before I lost a bunch of weight and I had to make changes. So, you know, I think strict carnivore is the ultimate elimination diet. Right. And what we tell people is go strict carnivore. And when I mean strict carnivore, when they're sick or they're trying to lose a lot of weight, no dairy, no eggs. I mean, go strict carnivore for at least 30 days, 90 days if you can, and then start adding things in later.
Mhm.
Until your body can tolerate those things, because that's part of the problem too. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Richelle, people with gluten insensitivities, lactose insensitivities, all these things like that. I think, let's face it, our bodies were meant to digest lactose. We've been doing it for thousands of years.
Mhm.
Same thing with gluten. And I get it. There's some differences in the food that could be true. But still, if you're having problems like that, it's because you're not metabolically healthy. So take all that stuff away, go strict carnivore, and then maybe add that stuff in, and it probably won't be a problem.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is a great topic as well. And I agree with you. I mean, there's lactose in breast milk, and breastfeeding was the natural way to nurse your baby, when you didn't have access to store-bought cow's milk and goat's milk and all that stuff. You fed your baby from your breasts. And I think that's another issue that's happening right now is we're eating such a poor quality diet as young people and as adolescents. Puberty is starting earlier and earlier for young girls. And according to Dr. Elizabeth Bright, who is she's like my gal when it comes to thyroid things. She said that women used to start their cycles, girls used to start their cycles after the age of 16. So between the age of 16 and 18. Now there are 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-old girls who are starting their menstruation. And it's that's not normal. That is not normal, which is very scary and very also telling that our body is our way of eating our food is not ideal. It is not optimal. Hormones in the body are built and made from saturated animal fat, not plant fat, not nuts, not any, not suboptimal lipids. They are made from saturated animal fats. Those are the precursors to our hormones. And we need that in order for our brain to function properly, in order for our muscles and bones and tissues to respond properly. There are just so many functions that are necessary that require these fats, but it's the low fat era. Oh, let's go gluten free and just plop it up with rice and sugar and bran and all this kind of stuff. No, you need more fiber. And it's all of this is just making you insulin resistant, have hyperglycemia constantly. And I used to live in that, my blood sugar, I'm glad I didn't check it because it was probably over 200 or more, with the binge eating and all that kind of stuff. But I think that we really need to be mindful of what we're feeding our children, of what example we're setting. And I love that you guys are healthy and you're able to incorporate those things again, because I would like to get to that point too. I think the other side of this is also when you've eaten that way for a long time, number one, your brain is addicted to the dopamine rush that it gets from the pharmaceutically manufactured foods. I'm sorry to say it, but
don't apologize.
These foods are literally modified to hit certain dopamine receptors. So you constantly crave that dopamine hit and then you get numb to it and then you have to eat more. So it goes from eating the small bag of Doritos to the regular size to the family size. And that's not enough. And suddenly you're 700 pounds and housebound, highly inflamed, on your deathbed, can't breathe on your own. And I know that's a really dramatic example, but I've seen it. I've seen it.
We've interviewed two people just like that.
Yeah.
One of them I went to high school with, and one of them you're probably talking about her, Limitless Lindy.
Yes, she's a part of our community. Yes,
we've interviewed her too, and it you're not exaggerating. True facts, and those are just two people we're talking about. There's hundreds of them across the world.
We've made food a drug.
Yes.
And the addiction to it is something that needs to be dealt with. And, that's something that Limitless Lindy taught us, that, she could eat around a lap band because, whatever was driving that addiction was still there. It was still present. And that's something that's kind of acceptable in our society because it's not thought of as heroin or crack, or it's not alcohol. Food's part of our life. Well, it can be, but it also can be your problem. And where that lies, I mean, I've said this many times, and I don't know where it started, but man, we do not have cookies in my house. I'd eat them all.
We just don't buy them because I would eat them.
I won't bake them. I won't make them. If people bring them to me, they are out, they are gone. Because that is something that I'm like, that's
Oh,
like
it's your
crack to me.
kryptonite.
I really like it, right? So don't go down that path, right? But why food becomes so comfortable and hits those receptors? Usually there's something behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hard part too. I think when we get into a population, I mean, I think there was statistics that we've heard that, when we were kids, it was very, very rare. Now we're looking at a population overweight. At least 50 to 70% of our population is overweight. And where does the obese part fall into that? I really don't know the statistics of it. But, if you look at pictures of like Shawn's mom and dad, and then my mom and dad, people were thin. It was rare. I mean, when I thought, my mom loved Elvis, and I thought, Mom, he's really fat, and now I look back at Elvis' picture and it's like, not in today's society. He looks pretty good.
Yeah, looks pretty healthy in comparison.
But you look at gym classes from the 1950s,
oh yeah,
and they, they'd have their shirts off and stuff. And I mean, all the boys look like young boys should look. They were very lean and very and muscular.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't big yet because they didn't have enough testosterone yet to develop, but they were lean and muscular. And you just, I see these kids in high school now that are boys, and they are just so soft. And it is just, it's sad. It is very sad, because that is not how men are supposed to look.
No. They're highly estrogenic, which also plays with their mental state. You were talking about the driving factors behind things. So there's such a long list. As someone who works with people with trauma, that's usually the biggest driver behind why people choose food, because choosing food is safe. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't talk back to you. It doesn't abuse you. Well, I say it doesn't abuse you, but it can be an abuser. It can become a Stockholm syndrome for you, where you constantly return to it, even though it's not good for you. Emotional needs going unmet, physical needs going unmet. I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid, that list of needs going unmet. People can search for other substances, whether that be drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be food, whether it be sex, whether it be pornography. Like, there's always something that you're seeking to kind of fill that gap and that void. And I think a lot of that also has to do with our gut permeability. So you're eating all these highly inflammatory foods, which is leading to gut permeability, which leads to food sensitivities. I also think the genetic modifications, the ultra pasteurization, like, have you seen that lately? Ultra pasteurization. So basically you're just drinking white water with, some polysorbate 80 and a few other gums in it to make it have some texture still. Like, it's just the destruction of food. Nothing is natural anymore. And then the people who are providing natural food, the government was trying to shut them down and trying to buy them out, and, trying to make it so that it's so expensive that people can't afford it. And it's like, well, I live on food stamps, so all I can afford is the ramen noodles from the grocery store. And it's like, there's got to be another option. There needs to be some education about this. There needs to be some accountability as well. I think accountability needs to happen big time for this. What do you guys think?
Well, and I mean, so there's so much going on here, Richelle. Thank you for being on, because my mind's just going like this. So I'm going to go back a few minutes ago on plants and saturated fat. And just to let people know, when we vilify cholesterol. Cholesterol. You talk about saturated fats. You didn't mention cholesterol, but you were thinking it, I'm sure. So cholesterol is part of what's in saturated fats from animals. Okay, there are saturated fats. You can't eat saturated fats, like coconut oil has saturated fats, but it doesn't have cholesterol in it. Cholesterol is what our brain needs, is what every cell in our body needs. So we vilify cholesterol, but it's very, very important. We would die without it. I don't buy that cholesterol causes heart disease at all. I don't think statins are ever warranted to prescribe. I think they are poison. And you cannot get cholesterol from plants. You can only get it from meat. That's the only place you can get it, in animal sources from meat. Here's another thing too that you were hitting on that I just loved. You know, if you and we saw this at a conference we went to a few months ago in San Antonio, and this doctor, which was actually a smart doctor that talked about carnivore diet. If you want strong bones and you want strong muscles, you will eat muscle and you will eat bones. And where do you get that? You don't get them from plants. I mean, think about that. It's really that simple. I mean, it really is. You want strong muscles, you want strong bones, you'll eat bones, you'll eat muscle, which is what meat is. Another thing on the fiber. I don't buy the fiber thing at all.
Nope.
We have been bamboozled about how important fiber is. We've been bamboozled about how important it is for our GI health, how important it is to decrease colon cancer, and to, you know, to not make us constipated. I don't buy it at all. How much fiber did the Eskimos eat?
None. Is there fiber in whale blubber?
Probably none. I mean, right.
Is there fiber in whale blubber?
Right. And do you think they had chronic constipation?
I don't think so. No.
I doubt it.
Well, I mean, a couple comments about this is that, you know, with the overuse of antibiotics, we have destroyed people's gut totally.
Yep.
And then when I look at, you know, my childhood being on a farm and ranch, you know, we ate so much raw food. I mean, we took stuff right out of the garden. We didn't wash it. We just ate it. Right. And, you know, the fact that we do as an organism, as a species, require bacteria in our bodies to assimilate our food is super important. So, you know, if you look at the population that probably my husband and I grew up in, I mean, there was just like, you need an antibiotic for this, you need an antibiotic for that, you know, and then pretty soon you have this population that can't tolerate any bacteria at all without having a revenge to it. And that's really destroyed a lot. I mean, and then we're not getting it in our daily, you know, food. I mean, the difference between when I was a child smelling the milk that we had at home and at school, I'm like, I'm not drinking that. There's something wrong with it. It smelled funny. It was weird. It wasn't like what, you know, and so we've eliminated all these things. And then on top of it, let's just give everybody as much refined sugar as we can so we can absorb it and run around all day. And then we wonder why our children can't sit still. We wonder why they have problems focusing. It couldn't be that we just juice them up with just, you know, and then let's give them more. I mean, I filled in when our kids were in school, and I was watching the kindergartners, and it was like, it was constant. Here's a snack. Here's snack time. Here's that. And then by the time we got to their lunch, they couldn't even eat. They were like, no, I'm not hungry. I'm like, well, you need to eat your food. And it's like, maybe we just have got this all wrong.
Yeah. I think this is a very sensitive subject as well, because I'm a first time mom. So I'm just learning a lot of this stuff. And obviously I see that, you know, and kids aren't going to eat if they're not hungry, but they're also going to ask for the things that their brain realizes and recognizes are going to be stimulants for them. So sugar, as far as I'm concerned, is considered a stimulant. So your child may not be hungry for the bacon and eggs that you just put out. But if you offer them fruit snacks, they're going to be like, yeah, I'll take some. I'll take a fruit roll up. I'll take a juice box. And I'm like, okay, you know, this is the slippery slope. And I think, you know, I'm trying to figure this out. It's a very delicate balance because I have a baby that's going to be turning 1 next month. And he can't yet communicate with me. No, I'm, you know, like I want something to eat. I want something to drink. Like, yeah, we sign and stuff like that, but it's not the same. And like his need for milk is different than someone like an adult's need for milk. So when he's signing for milk, obviously that means breast milk. He wants breast milk. So this is sort of a delicate dance that I'm trying to figure out, because he won't eat if he's not hungry. But if I offer him certain things, like, you know, he might take a bite and then put it down, but he just wants to be held, or he just wants to play or whatever. So I think we have to tread very carefully with that. And I like what you're saying. And I agree with you. Like, kids are running around just hyper, like all over the place. They can't sit still. They can't focus. They have little temper tantrums and attitude problems, because when they're coming down off that sugar, guess what happens? Their dopamine is crashing, their little bodies are crashing, they feel like hell, and they're just trying to express in the only way they know how, which is through, and I just don't think that's appropriate. I think if we give our children the opportunity to have a stable blood sugar, you feed them good quality foods at every opportunity. I think there's room for people to experiment if they want to include some, like fruits or whatever, little snacks. Like I make a little baby-led weaning animal-based muffin. So it's got chicken flour, but it has a banana and a little bit of raw honey in it and some cinnamon and stuff. But it's like eggs, butter, chicken flour, and then these other ingredients just to make it more interesting for him. And he's obsessed with them. Now, does he eat them all day, every day? No, he likes his meats and other things. But I think it's important to, as parents, that we are being mindful of what we're feeding our children, because it does have an effect on them. And you were talking about cholesterol, Shawn. Our body makes cholesterol as well, from what I understand. It's the first thing on the scene when we get sick. It's there for a reason, to fight off infections and to help us heal and recover. Our brain is fueled and made up of cholesterol. And we're wondering why people's IQs are lowering, why people aren't as smart, why they're having learning disabilities, why I could go down the total rabbit hole about the pokes, and what that does to children.
That too.
And I just think that there are so many variables working against us, that my thought was, what did people do 200 years ago?
Yeah,
that's what we talk about all the time.
Yeah, they co-slept, they breastfed, and then they only had certain things. So they probably had their meat, they had their butter, they had their dairy. That's what I'm starting with. And when you have seasonal fruits and vegetables, whatever, if you want to incorporate those, be my guest. I don't incorporate them. My husband likes them. So, I do for him. But that's what I was thinking of. Like, what did people do 200 years ago? That is what I want to be doing now. And that is what we're doing.
Well, you mentioned mindful eating. I think you were talking about it even if you didn't mention mindful. But I will tell you, one of the things that I trained myself to do, and I had to train myself to do this. And Jen and I talk about this when we talk about, just a way of eating. First of all, eat your meat first. The vegetables and the fruit and the potatoes, I don't think they're necessarily bad per se. For some people, they should completely stay away from at first. But eat your meat first. And how many times have I eaten my meat first? And then all of a sudden, that big 2 cups of mashed potatoes I can't eat it anymore. But also, and eggs, another one for breakfast. So, eat your eggs first. And then all of a sudden, you don't want all the other stuff, even if you've cooked it. And how many times can you eat your eggs, and then you're done with everything, and you might even eaten some toast, and you're like, well, I can't eat another egg because it's just too filling. But I could eat more toast. I could eat 2 or 3 more pieces of toast, right? All the time. And so I trained myself, look, if I can't eat more meat right now, but I could eat more of something that's easier to digest or whatever, then I shouldn't probably eat. If I can't eat more meat, then I shouldn't make another piece of toast or eat more potatoes. I should probably just stop eating.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. Like you were talking about, you use the term mindful eating. That's kind of where we have to make the decision. Am I physically hungry, or am I emotionally hungry? Am I mentally hungry? Am I hungry because it's that time of day and I've been conditioned to want to eat at this time of day? There are a lot of factors that go into this. And I've seen this as someone who has overcome disordered eating. I mean, there are still days where I'll eat all the meat and fat first. And sometimes I'll put down a couple of pounds of meat, with like half a pound of butter. And I'm like, I could still go for something else, and it's like, I think the other thing is like, we're looking for that stretch in our stomach. For some of us, the volume eaters, we're looking for that stretch feeling in our stomach. And we don't get that with carnivore the same way you get that with a boatload of carbs. Like I think of, Thanksgiving is coming up tomorrow. And I think about all these people that are going to be like wearing their stretch pants and loosening their belts, and they're going to feel bloated and distended, and they're just going to want to have a big nap afterwards because, number one, they're not used to eating like that. Number two, they're going to gorge themselves on every possible thing and delight that they want. And number three, their blood sugar is going to go through Because how much of your plate is meat? Like this much? And the rest of your plate is like the macaroni and cheese, the stuffing, the potatoes, the vegetables, the candied yams. Like it's like basically a carb buffet with a small amount of meat. And I'm like, I mean, I'm grateful for the meat side of it because the turkey is a big bird and I can eat a lot of turkey. So
right.
Yeah.
So I like to go to comments. Michelle, you have a fan. You have a fan there.
Hi, Michelle.
So Richelle she says you're an inspiration to go carnivore. That's so awesome. And that's why we had you on, to help inspire others. So as we wrap this podcast up, we could go on for hours, Richelle. I love what you're sharing. It just goes right along with this. One thing I just want to mention really quick is on your Instagram, which is Real Life Carnivore, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Real Life Carnivore. You talk about meat as medicine, and we've already mentioned ADHD. We've mentioned gut issues, but IBS. Amy, Carnivore Amy, that was on our show Monday, she talked about somebody reversing their cancer with going carnivore. I mean, carnivore is, meat is medicine. Food is our medicine. If we eat the right foods, we don't need medicine for high blood pressure, for high cholesterol, for reflux, all these diseases that are dietary related. So meat is medicine. I love you talking about that. So as we wind this up, Richelle, what do you have a passion for?
Oh gosh, I have a passion for serving on and loving on people and encouraging them to be healthier, to educate themselves, to nourish their bodies, especially if they're wanting to have children. I think giving your child the best start, and it starts at conception. I think giving children the best start at life is you can't give a better gift to your child. So making sure that your body is fully healthy and nourished before you even conceive, I think that's a great place to be. And then just being a light to other people. The Bible says that a city on a hill cannot be hidden. And I just want to be a light. I want to be a light that shines so brightly that people can't get lost anymore. So that's my passion.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for being on our show. You've helped us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So thank you so much, Richelle.
Thank you.
And hang on after the show, because I want to chat with you really quick. Listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Monday to our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, and have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. Thank you so much.